Isaac Whitman was no ordinary man. He wasn't just rich. He was incredibly wealthy, owning a chain of successful tech companies. But despite all his achievements, something had been troubling him recently. Isaac often wondered if kindness still thrived in a world that seemed increasingly self-centered. He decided to find out for himself, not by conducting surveys or asking questions, but by immersing himself in a world far removed from his own. One brisk morning in downtown Atlanta, Isaac sat on a sidewalk. He was in disguise, dressed in a tattered shirt, loose-fitting jeans, and worn-out dirt-stained shoes. He had smudged grime on his face to appear authentic and carried a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." It wasn't an elaborate disguise, but it made him completely unrecognizable. The city buzzed around him, with business people rushing by, their eyes glued to their phones. Isaac spent hours observing people. Some walked by without acknowledging him at all. Others gave him fleeting looks of pity before moving on. He was beginning to think his experiment might fail when his attention was drawn to a woman sitting across the street. She had a somber expression, her few belongings packed neatly into a small bag beside her. Life seemed to have taken its toll on her, yet she sat upright, her chin held high with quiet determination. Her name was Rose. For 3 years she had been homeless, a victim of losing her job and spiraling misfortune. Despite everything, Rose didn't complain. She believed that things could still change for the better. That day she held a styrofoam cup of coffee, purchased with spare change, watching the world pass her by. Isaac hesitated but eventually approached her, holding up his sign. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "I'm really hungry. Could you spare anything?" Rose looked up at him, her dark eyes studying his face. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then with a faint smile, she responded, "I don't have much, but I can share what I do have." She reached into her bag and pulled out a peanut butter sandwich, neatly wrapped in wax paper. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "It's not much, but it'll help." Isaac took the sandwich, visibly stunned. "Thank you," he said, genuinely moved. But Rose wasn't finished yet. "I've got an extra bottle of water," she added, passing it to him. "And if you're looking for a shelter, there's one 2 blocks from here. They'll let you in if you get there before nightfall." A lump formed in Isaac's throat. He hadn't anticipated someone with so little to give so generously. He sat down beside her and began eating. As he did, Rose started to share her story, how she lost her job, how she ended up on the streets, and how she held on to hope even in the hardest of times. That evening, as the city's lights illuminated the streets, Isaac left the sidewalk with a promise to himself. He would return. Rose had passed his test, but his experiment was far from over. The next day, Isaac came back in disguise. This time, he carried a small backpack stuffed with cash, hidden beneath a ragged blanket. He wanted to see just how far Rose's kindness could stretch. When he approached her again, she greeted him with a warm smile. "You're back," she said. "I am," he replied. "I wanted to thank you for yesterday. That sandwich meant more to me than you know." Rose chuckled softly. "Sometimes all it takes is a little care. Besides, I know what it's like to be in need." Isaac listened as she spoke about her experiences on the streets, the people who had helped her, the ones who hadn't, and the small victories like finding a warm spot to sleep on cold nights. She also talked about how hard it was to stay hopeful when life seemed so harsh. During their conversation, Isaac reached into his backpack and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He handed it to her. "I found this," he said, continuing his role as a fellow beggar. "But I think you need it more than I do." Rose blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Absolutely," Isaac insisted. After a moment of hesitation, Rose accepted the money, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do this." Her gratitude was genuine, but what she did next left Isaac speechless. Rather than keeping the money for herself, she walked over to another homeless man a few feet away. He appeared older and frail. Rose handed him half of the bill. "Here," she said, "this is for you too." Isaac was stunned. She had proven that kindness wasn't about how much you had. It was about how much you were willing to share. On the third day, Isaac returned, but this time he wasn't in disguise. Dressed in his usual tailored suit, he stepped out of a sleek black car parked near Rose's spot. At first, she didn't recognize him. She glanced at him briefly before turning her attention back to the street. Isaac walked over and knelt beside her, holding out an envelope. "It's me," he said softly. Rose frowned, puzzled. "Do I know you?" "I'm the man you shared your sandwich with," he explained. Her eyes widened as she realized who he was. "Wait, you?" Isaac nodded and handed her the envelope. "You taught me something about kindness," he said, "and I want to thank you for it." Inside the envelope was a note and a check for $50,000. The note read, "For your kindness, for your heart, and for your hope. May this help you find the fresh start you deserve." Tears rolled down Rose's cheeks as she read the note. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Just promise me one thing," Isaac said. "Pay it forward in any way you can. The world could use more people like you." Rose nodded, clutching the envelope as if it were the most precious thing she had ever received. For the first time in years, she felt like her life could change. And all because someone had seen the light in her when the world had turned away. As Isaac walked back to his car, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. Rose waved at him, her face glowing with a radiant smile. Isaac smiled back, knowing he had found the answer he was searching for, and maybe even a little hope for humanity. This brings us to the end of the story. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more amazing stories. Have a wonderful day.